Can you briefly explain what market diversification means in the context of Namibia's trade strategy under the AFCFTA?
Thank you so much, Ivan. And for Namibia, market diversification, I think it goes beyond market diversification. I think the most important for Namibia is that we have made commitments under the African Union. You are aware of the Agenda 2063, whereby we have made a pledge to the Africa that we want. And one of the initiatives that we have is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, whereby we want to liberalize trade amongst all African members. This liberalization entails many things, but the most important one is that we try to reduce barriers to entry of African products into African markets. So that is what we have done with the negotiation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have reduced tariffs, which are the duties that you pay on 90% of the products that we export in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and then the other 10 will be phased down over a period of 10 years. So the diversification, basically, as you are aware, Namibia is a member of SACU, Namibia is a member of SADC, where we already are trading, but this diversification gives us an opportunity to spread our risk across multiple countries and multiple sectors. So with the diversification, we're not only looking at the commodities that we export, it's both the commodities as well as the markets that we were trying to export. Of course, you know that we want to diversify from primarily being a raw material producer and exporter to one whereby we export more value-added final consumable products. So that is really what our diversification strategy looks like. Thank you.
Why is market diversification important for Namibia at this stage of AFCFTA's implementation?
Yes, I think one that is really important is that you want to have a more balanced economy. And I think very importantly is also it enables Namibia to withstand external shocks such as climate change, global recessions, or in our current era, the global geopolitical disruptions that you have. So we know that Africa then serves an alternative to our traditional markets that we generally were used to, which was either in Europe or the Americas or in SACU. So for us is how does Namibia look at a way in which we can withstand shocks, have a more balanced and productive trade structure. That's why it's important for us right now. You cannot put all your eggs in one basket.
How does this strategy align with Namibia's broader industrialization and value addition goals?
So it is, in fact, one of the pillars of our industrialization strategy, which is your market access pillar, whereby you want to diversify your market sources as much as possible. Also recall that Namibia is a small population, but we serve a market of 1.4 billion, 1.2 billion Africans by joining the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So when a company wants to set up in Namibia, they know that we are accessing this big market size, and you are not just confined to the 3 million Namibians or the 60 million SACU or 350 million SADC, but you have this bigger, broad market, which does tie in very well with our trade strategy, which, of course, you know, the trade strategy is part of your industrialization strategy.
Are there specific African markets Namibia is targeting more aggressively under the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Of course, one very interesting is that when we do target markets, you know that it's not government that does right? So government merely sits to see how they can improve the policy space, and that is why government goes and negotiates these trade agreements on behalf of its citizens. But it is the private sector that then goes and looks for those particular markets. Instinctively, you'd want to go to a market that has a big size. Instinctively, you want to go to a market that can afford your products. So, of course, you know that because of our economies of scale, our cost of production is slightly higher than other countries. So you want to find a market that can also be attractive and competitive for the products that you are selling. So in general, the private sector would go out there and they would then do the assessments to see what market is feasible for their products and their clientele, etc. But of course, the big markets we are looking at, the huge ones on the continent, I think it's all of them. In the east, you have a big market there. In the north, you have a big market, as well as in the west and central of Africa. So I think it's very well distributed, but ultimately it's what makes business sense to that entity or that company that is going to trade in those countries.
How will this strategy help reduce Namibia's reliance on traditional trading partners outside of Africa?
Definitely, that is one of the aims, is for us to move away from the traditional partners. We know that the traditional partners are shifting in some of the requirements that they make, whether it is green or climate-induced requirements, or other requirements that are produced, and even the standards, the stringent standards that are now being imposed, that kind of non-tariff barriers, as you can call them that. So with the AFCFTA, we know that we have negotiated an agreement as Namibia with the 54 African countries, and we know that should there be changes, we are all at the table on equal footing to try to solve issues, but also see how it is that we could amend the agreement should the need arises. So the traditional markets are not as lucrative as they used to be, say 10 or 15 years ago. But we've seen that, and of course you read every day in the paper that Africa is the next frontier of growth. So we're also trying to position ourselves to say, how do we contribute to supplying this frontier of growth?
Thank you so much for making time to be with us here on Eye on SADC.
It is my pleasure, and thank you so much. Until the next time.